Welcome to Inside Coverage. Jason Fitz not here today. I don't know what he's been doing. Lazy. I haven't seen anything on Yahoo from him at the NCAA tournament, so I'll just assume that he's just sitting on his couch somewhere. But anyway, I am Frank Schwab, your host today, taking over for Fitz, along with Jori Epstein. Jori, how are you doing today? How is April treating you so far? And did you watch any of March Madness at all? Like, did you watch any of the tournament?
Frank, I am doing well. We're going to move past most of the March Madness question, but I will say the wind chill in New York is 28 degrees below freezing on April 8th. I need to get to Texas immediately.
Oh,
What are we
goodness.
doing
Yeah, it's
here?
not much better in Colorado where it snows every other day. I'm sick of it already, although I'm going to try to go to a baseball game on Thursday afternoon. That might be pretty stupid. I don't want to sit in the snow. I have sat in the snow for a baseball game at Coors Field. Not exactly fun, as you can imagine. But as I mentioned, I am out here in Colorado, and Colorado was the epicenter of the world on Friday because why? It was
Epicenter of
Colorado.
the world.
It was the Colorado Showcase. We were calling it Pro Day because Deion Sanders, who also likes to be called Coach Prime on First Reference, has a term for everything that we must use. So it has to be the Colorado Showcase. It's been forever since Colorado football was relevant at all, but the entire NFL world was here on Friday, or at least the entire Cleveland Browns organization was here in Boulder, looking at two guys in particular, Shedeur Sanders, Travis Hunter. Travis didn't do too much. Shedeur was kind of the show because we wanted to see what he did. And all of a sudden, Shedeur patting the ball became this really big story. That's how you kind of know we are in this purgatory, right? Like, this is just crazy NFL draft. We need something to talk about, right? Shedeur Sanders patting the ball too much.
Absolutely. I did reach out to people about this because, as much as we want to say, oh, this is just something here and there are a lot of players engaging in this conversation. I believe it starts off. Andre Cisco says, you see him and he's patting the ball as much as this. Darius Slayton is defending Shedeur Sanders, saying he promises he can pat the ball. He'll be just fine. If DBs were that good at breaking on the ball with the Pats, they'd have 8+ picks a year. Same guys are falling for a two-man dagger concept. And he goes on and on and on. What a joke. Then you have Andre Cisco's like, all right, we get it. You want targets. And then Micah Parsons gets involved and says, you realize that a pat on the ball can be the difference between a sack or a throwaway or first completion. So I did reach out to different people. And I think what was interesting to me is that I found there was a difference in what people in the scouting community were telling me compared to what people in the coaching community were telling me. So in the scouting community, they were like, yeah, I mean, if he's patting the ball every single time, that is a tell. Now, it wasn't that that's for sure going to be an issue, but I did have someone in the scouting community tell me, one, it is a real thing. And then two, it's almost every throw, so a definite tell. And they had said if you pat the ball sometimes, fine, but once you start to pat it every time, that's when it becomes a problem. Interesting to me was that I talked to two people in the coaching community, neither of whom were as concerned. And the first one said that, okay, it's a minor tell. The other one said that it happens all the time. Everyone pats the ball. It's not about whether you pat the ball and whether it's a tell. It's just how quickly are you getting out the ball. And I asked these people from the coaching community, would you try and coach this out? And both of them agreed they were more concerned about the release time than the pats because they do not think that, oh, you're going to get an interception because you know that the pat means the throw. The bigger question is just if you hesitate for too long, maybe you get a sack or an incompletion, you just have too much pressure. But they were not concerned about this as a sort of like, I guess if a verbal tick is for talking, a throwing tick.
Yeah, it's I seem to think like logically that is kind of a big deal. Like, it might not end up with 8 interceptions or
This is how
anything,
we
but
know
if we
you live
think
in
about
Colorado, the epicenter of the world.
the epicenter of the world, just Friday for the showcase, by the way, not Pro Day. Just think about it. Like, yeah, if defenders know that the ball's coming out right now because you pat the ball and they get an extra step, they might not get 8 interceptions, 10 interceptions off of it. But uh, uh, look, think about it this way. If 3 out of every 100 passes, a linebacker could break on the ball and have one step on you and knock it away, your completion percentage goes from 68 to 65. Like, that's a big difference, right? Like, that's just 3 out of every 100 passes. Like, I think it has to be a little bit of a big deal, but I don't think it's something that can't be coached out of him. Like, he's a smart guy.
I
He's
disagree.
really. You think it's just the way he throws?
I asked coaches, multiple people who have been offensive coordinators during the course of their career, and neither of them were concerned about coaching this out because they just think the question is, can you throw with strong mechanics and can you throw in a reasonable amount of time? Can you get the ball out quickly? And actually, that's even interesting too because Cam Ward had a conversation with people during the combine saying people want to talk about holding on to the ball, but if I have the protection and I'm letting these routes develop, sometimes that could be a good thing. The bigger issue is just if you don't have the protection. But I really think that to say that this is look, I think it's key to me that there's a difference in the scouting and coaching perspective on this because I think when you're watching film, you might see a tell. When you're evaluating this, whether you're a college scout evaluating what they're going to be like at the pro level or a pro scout trying to advance and give your team a couple extra tells of what they can look for, in the speed of the game, I don't think defenders are actually going to be able to see that, implement it, and act accordingly in time.
Absolutely. I think that this is just the continuation of the Shedeur Sanders circus. And we got to get used to it because it's not going to slow down. Like it's once he's in the NFL, he's going to be one of those dudes we're just following. And there's some people out there want him to fail, honestly. Like I think that's true. Like it's just he's just a divisive guy. He's a guy everybody likes talking about. So I think when we cut through the noise though, some people loved his pro day workout. He's very accurate. He threw the deep ball very well. But what does that really mean? I mean, when you're doing this in shorts and shirts against no defense, like, okay, like anybody being considered for the NFL draft should be able to shine in that kind of environment. What did you think of Shedeur's pro day? What have you heard of Shedeur's pro day? Did it move the needle good, bad, and different? I just kind of looked at it like, all right, Shedeur kind of reinforced what he does well. He's an accurate quarterback. He does have enough arm strength to throw the deep ball and do it accurately. I didn't see this moving the needle at all, but what are you hearing and what did you think about Shedeur Sanders on pro day?
Yeah, I mean, I definitely think there's a technique element of that is one of Shadeur's strengths is that he has just refined his technique over the years. I think that when you look at this, pro day is really not the main data point for people. I mean, even people were making a big idea of, oh, which Titans are going to be at the pro day versus which aren't when the team was still going to be there. And like the private workout, the 30 visit, the pro day is important, but all of these people who are trying to put together tells on what teams are attending the pro day need to keep in mind that there are also a pro day for Travis Hunter and all these other players going on. And so it's not just Shedeur Sanders that we should try and be evaluating who's going on the basis of. I think what was interesting to me, I was talking to a GM at owners' meetings last week, and I know we had talked on this podcast this idea of, okay, Cam has a little bit more physical potential. I'd had some scouts who believed that Shedeur was more physically maxed out and wasn't going to continue to improve physically. And so you have to realize that whole like, oh, Shedeur has a higher floor, but Cam has a higher ceiling. That's not the opinion for everyone around the league. I did have someone tell me that they felt like, first of all, Cam could improve and refine how he had some of his technique, and then the person thought that there was more physical development ahead for Shedeur because over the past year, they said that Shedeur had gained 15 pounds of what they considered good weight. And so they think that there actually was more of an upside for Shedeur that we haven't seen yet. Now, again, that wasn't something specifically from the pro day, but I think it's kind of a reminder to me of we have all of these narratives that take off, particularly when you're talking about Deion Sanders' son, whether that's about patting the ball, whether that's about his physical potential. And there's just so many opinions that pretty much every narrative we're hearing is not a consensus across the league.
That's and that's been the story on Shedeur the whole time. Like there's no consensus, and everybody's all across the board. Where do you think we stand right now? Because things are coming into clear focus, and I believe anyway, if you're reading tea leaves and betting odds and the reports out there, Shedeur kind of seems to be off the table at number 2 right now. His teammate, who we'll talk about, seems to be kind of gaining favor there. I don't think number 3 is on the table for him necessarily. What do you think of Shedeur's draft stock as we stand right now? I know we talk about this every week, but this is kind of the story of the draft to me. Like this is the guy we talk about this for weeks that he's the wild card. He's the guy who could go anywhere from 2 to 20, and it wouldn't surprise us at all. Where are you at with Shedeur Sanders draft stock right now from what you've been hearing at the owners' meetings and otherwise?
Yeah, I think that if I'm looking at the draft order, I'm saying Cam Ward is going to the Tennessee Titans at the first overall pick as of April 8th. That seems like the overwhelmingly likely possibility. And I know since we last recorded this podcast, the Titans did cancel a private workout with Shedeur, which again, I think I heard someone else say it, this is not like, oh, Shedeur isn't any good. It's, if you know you're taking your guy, don't waste Shedeur's time.
Don't waste time.
And I do think we're increasingly getting there. And the reason that on Friday morning I felt like we weren't there is because they still had this pro day and they still had these final meetings. I think we're basically there. Now, again, could there be some crazy trade? Yes. But if the Titans stay at number one, which I expect them to, they need a quarterback. They feel like Cam Ward is sufficient of that pick and that they'll be excited to have him at that pick. I expect Cam Ward to go to the Titans at the first overall pick. Then you go to the Cleveland Browns and New York Giants, and overwhelmingly, and I know I just warned against consensus, so I am a little bit of a hypocrite for saying this, but I do believe that overwhelmingly people think there are two generational prospects in this draft, and it's not actually Cam Ward. Now, quarterbacks are in a different category than generational prospects in some ways. Like, it's great if you get a Trevor Lawrence or Caleb Williams. Also, they don't always work out. But what you have to realize is that quarterbacks are going to be pushed up the board just because of the supply-demand element. So when you're talking about guys who in any draft class, they would be around the top of their position, you have Penn State edge rusher Abdul Carter and Colorado receiver defensive back Travis Hunter. I expect them to go to the Cleveland Browns and New York Giants. I think the question is just in what order they go. And I don't think there's really a wrong answer. I think if you're the Browns, you could say Abdul Carter on the other side of Myles Garrett. That's just insane. We are going to wreck it defensively. Remember, 2 years ago, they had lost to Deshaun Watson. Joe Flacco was at quarterback, and their defense was the number one defense, and so they made it to the playoffs on that alone. Or you could say, we already have Myles Garrett. We already have some of those cornerstones. We really need someone for our next quarterback to throw to. We're going to take Travis Hunter at receiver. There's a lot of different elements.
Okay, so we're pretty much in agreement, I think, that what we think right now, sitting here on April 8th, is that it's going to be Ward and then Hunter and Carter in some order. What does that mean for Shedeur? Yes, those are the top three. Right.
What that means for Shedeur is I think that's fascinating because we got so caught up on, is Shedeur going to the Browns? Is Shedeur going to the Giants? Which, by the way, I would not be surprised if both, and I think for sure at least the Cleveland Browns, take a quarterback in this draft. I think they'll just take one later, get the generational prospect, and then develop a guy. So I look at, okay, number 6, Las Vegas Raiders. We know how much we've heard about the connection between Tom Brady and Shedeur Sanders. We also know that the Raiders last year really wanted Michael Penix, and I think they thought that Michael Penix Jr. was still going to be available when they got on the board. And then we just had this insane historic run of 6 quarterbacks in the top 12 picks. I would not be surprised at all if the Raiders take him at 6. I think the Jets are a possibility at 7. Seems less likely, but a possibility. Again, Justin Fields probably is not going to be your guy forever. And then I think you look at the New Orleans Saints at number 9 as another great place. And I know we talked about this on the podcast last week. Fitz was talking about how he loves that as a landing spot for Shedeur, give him a year behind Derek Carr. My main question is, if the Saints really thought that that was going to happen, wouldn't Kellen Moore have been at their pro day? Because I know pro days aren't the only element, and maybe it was just that, oh, you're getting a private workout and a 30 visit anyway, and you just got back from owners' meetings, so you need to get home. But they sent their quarterbacks coach, they sent their receivers coach, they did not send their play caller to Colorado Pro Day. And I think if you really believe he's going to be there as a top 10 pick, I'm not saying who for a 3rd round pick, I think that they would have had a bigger presence there.
By the way, betting, I'll bring it back to betting since I know you're such a gambling woman there, Jori.
Yes.
The favorite right now, the betting favorite to draft Shedeur Sanders is New Orleans Saints. Like, they've taken over. So I think people are starting to see that fit. And the whole thing, before we get to Travis Hunter, because I do want to talk about him, how much do you think, like, oh, we brought this guy in for a visit. We were at his pro day. Like you said, Kellen Moore wasn't at the pro day. I covered way back in the day Mike Shanahan, who was one of those paranoid people you're ever going to meet.
Yeah.
And they had an entire draft class one year where they did not interview that player.
Yeah.
They did not bring them in for visits. They did not do any of that because they were so paranoid that people were going to catch on to their draft. I think it was a Ryan Clady draft. You can go back and look at that class. That they didn't want anybody tipping off, any of their picks. And I view that the same way. Whenever I see a team bring in a guy, I'm like, this might just mean nothing. You talk about smoke screens. I think the biggest smoke screen is, oh, we interviewed this guy, or we were at his pro day, or we had him in for a private workout. That just might mean you're trying to throw the rest of the NFL off because you don't want to tip anybody off.
Right.
Maybe the Saints are like, no, Kellen, don't go to his pro day because what are we going to see there? We can watch all the film. It's not like it's not televised by NFL Network. Don't go. We don't want to tip anybody off because we're sitting here at 9 and we want Shedeur. Like, that's possible, right?
Definitely possible. Again, it's lying season, and sometimes lying isn't just overtly lying, it's also like how many smoke screens can we create. So the Raiders and Saints seem like the most likely to me, and I agree with you. As I was saying, and again, I'm just talking out of both sides of my mouth, but you kind of have to in this season because everything could mean so many different things. I think that the Saints could feel very good about taking him with a 30 and a private workout and all that, or maybe you get your quarterback coach to work him out right after the pro day, and then you bring him back to New Orleans if that goes well. I also think that, Kellen understands the circus. He has coached with the Eagles, which have their own type of circus, and the Cowboys. He's been backup quarterback, quarterbacks coach, and offensive coordinator. And so he understands what that Dallas circus was like. Going to New Orleans, where there's not the same degree of circus, there's a much quieter owner. I think Kellen can manage all of the Sanders element. I think that it would be good to get a little bit of energy because to me, I really view the Kellen Moore era as this is really when they're moving on from the Sean Payton, Drew Brees era because Dennis Allen and a lot of those players were kind of the holdover from that past Super Bowl team. And so I think that moves you forward. The other thing that you have to keep in mind is, yes, 30 visits are a big tell because overwhelmingly there are teams who, like the Cowboys, when I was covering them, had years where every single person they drafted had come in for a visit, or maybe it was like the top 5 rounds, for sure the top 3. Like it really was a tell. Now, again, you're bringing 30 people in. You're drafting 3 or 4 of them in that range, but it was a tell. That said, every once in a while, a player drops you're not going to expect to be there. And going back to when I was covering the Cowboys, when CeeDee Lamb was available to them at the 17th pick, they hadn't visited him with him in depth. They had not brought him into my understanding. But they're like, we can get CeeDee Lamb at 17. Okay, then we need to forget that we need an offensive lineman, forget that we don't know how to draft a defensive tackle and probably should be throwing more darts at the wall. We're going to take this guy, and it's worked out great. He's now on his second contract and perennial Pro Bowl type player. So there are times when a guy just drops. So yeah, again, what's interesting to me, Frank, is what if the Raiders don't take Shedeur at 6? And what if the Saints don't take him at 9? Which, by the way, it's a little disingenuous to say Shedeur is falling because most years the second quarterback is not necessarily, not most years. Some years the second quarterback is not going to be a top 5 or 10. Remember, Kenny Pickett was the first quarterback of his draft class at 22, and then no one went until, I think it was Malik Willis in the 3rd round. So sometimes this doesn't happen. So falling relative to what we think is not necessarily falling relative to what teams think of Shedeur. So I would ask you, if he gets past the Raiders at 6 and the Saints at 9, are you looking at the Colts at 14? They have a lot of people in there.
Oh, they're going to, the Colts are
look,
such a mess.
Let me run down. Bears at 10, I don't think, Bears at 10 should not take Shedeur. Niners at 11, you should be paying Brock Purdy. Cowboys at 12, you still are paying Dak the highest contract in the league. Dolphins at 13. You could try and say, well, if you have Tua for a couple more years, Shedeur is also like pocket passer type. Colts at 14, Falcons at 15, Cardinals at 16, Bengals at 17, Seahawks at 18. There's not a lot of great fits here.
But they just invest in Darnold.
Unless he falls to the Steelers at 21, but
right. But even the Steelers, it's reasonable to say, maybe the Steelers just don't like him. I think there was a lot of nonsense out of the combine that I didn't really like, and I don't really want to get into all of that about his personality and letting anonymous people just trash Shedeur Sanders. There are reasons football-wise where you would not like Shedeur Sanders. He holds the ball too long. And like you said, maybe they are one of those teams that think he's maxed out physically, and this is just what he is. He's not a great athlete, even though he's Deion's kid. He doesn't have this unbelievable howitzer of an arm. He's just kind of what he is. And I think it's good. I like Shedeur, actually. But I could see teams being like, nah, we're not into that. I could see Jackson Dart being ahead of, on some teams' boards. Maybe the Steelers are one of those teams that just Shedeur slips to them, and they're like, actually, we like Jackson Dart more. Or whoever, whatever the flavor is.
Like more about Jackson Dart than Shedeur, Frank?
I don't know. I can't sit there and tell you that. I don't personally. But I think that there's a chance, because you talked about before, some teams have a 4th round grade on Shedeur. That means you're not really in love with him. And maybe the Steelers are one of those teams. I don't know if they are or not. I don't think anybody's going to know until they're on the clock if Shedeur is there. So you could see a situation where all of a sudden, the Steelers passed out of it. There's another free fall because you're getting into that point in the draft where not all these teams need quarterback. The Packers don't need a quarterback. The Eagles don't need a quarterback. The teams drafting at the end of the draft really don't need a quarterback. So it could be a really, really interesting fall. I'm interested to see. I'm interested to see where Shedeur goes. But I do want to talk about Travis Hunter because while Shedeur is kind of, I think, one of the stories of the draft because where he might go, I think Travis Hunter is kind of the story of this draft class, if that makes sense. because we've never seen a player quite like Travis Hunter. And I wrote this week about the history of two-way players in the NFL, basically since the Super Bowl era, because they used to do it in the 50s and 40s and all that. But basically since Chuck Bednarik retired in 1962, there really haven't been many two-way players. I almost forgot about Roy Green, the great receiver for the Cardinals, started his career as a defensive back, once played 108 snaps in a game in 1981. He's one of the few that did it, but it was limited. And he even said, this is tough. You do it because you love the game, but it takes a toll on you for sure. Dion famously did it in 1996, but that was not even for really a full season. He played all the snaps in week one, and they were like, this is probably a bad idea. And they kind of tapered that as the season went on. Other guys, J.J. Watt and Mike Vrabel and all that, yeah, they play a few snaps here and there, defense, offense, but not everybody can handle this. First of all, I want to talk about the odds changing on Travis Hunter, because all of a sudden we're getting this buzz that Travis Hunter is going to go number 2. Cleveland Browns were at Pro Day, and I don't know that necessarily it was for Shedeur Sanders. I think they might be looking at Travis Hunter because they've said, yes, he's primarily, Andrew Berry at the Combine said, look, we think he can do both. The answer is yes. Andrew Berry said, the answer to whether Travis Hunter is an offensive or defensive player is yes. He can do both. But he did say we primarily view him as a receiver right away, which was really interesting to me. But if a team like the Browns says he can do both, he can be a freak like that, all of a sudden he is in play at number 2, and the betting odds has flipped. At BetMGM, Travis Hunter now is the favorite to go number 2, where Abdul Carter was that favorite for most of the offseason. Do you think Travis Hunter goes number 2 to the Browns, or do you think that's a good fit?
Yeah, I'm glad you asked. I think that Travis Hunter goes number 3 to the New York Giants because I think he's talented enough to go number 2. But I think if I'm the Browns, it just makes so much sense to get Abdul Carter, Myles Garrett. As we've talked about in a league of parity, you should try and be the best at something. And they could be the best defensive line in the league and the best pass rushing group and just destroy quarterbacks. And if you have a rookie quarterback coming in, even if it's not someone who's going to start right away or they're going to start their second year, you're stealing possessions for them if you can just end so many of these defensive drives. It's like, okay, that drive didn't go well offensively. Well, don't worry. We're going to keep the pressure down in terms of how many points you have to score. I'm glad you brought up Andrew Berry's comments because Andrew Berry talked again about Travis Hunter on or at owners' meetings last week in Florida. And he said that some people kind of took in a wrong way what he was saying at the Combine because you didn't, Frank, but a lot of people said, oh, Andrew Berry thinks he's going to be a receiver. No, Andrew Berry said he can play both ways. We would probably have him as a receiver. And I think a part of this is, as we discussed, it's really hard to play both ways. And from what I've heard from the scouting community and the coaching community, it is easier for a player to play full-time DB and have packages at receiver than it is to play full-time receiver and have packages at DB, just because of the nature of offenses and defenses, and you have like more role gadget type players on the offense. And as we've discussed, this is not the same as a Zach Bond with the Eagles or Micah Parsons with the Cowboys playing linebacker and going on and off the ball. Then you're learning one scheme. You're going to be among one group of 11 players, including yourself, and you're learning one scouting report. If you're playing offense and defense, that's completely different schemes, completely different scouting reports of the opponents, and you have to just completely understand like 22 players instead of 11. So it really is a huge thing. And this isn't about questioning guys' IQ. It's just about understanding that part of playing football, especially at the pro level, is working in sync with the guys on the field around you. And so how much practice time are you missing and how much chemistry are you missing? And if you have some mental mistakes because it's impossible to be in both meetings at the same time, is your talent going to exceed the risk of the mental mistakes you're making? Now, Andrew Berry, again, what he said last week is that he can play both ways. He's brilliant from a football standpoint, has rare intelligence, and, quote, I don't think there's necessarily a limit to how you can use him. I think he'll be good at either spot. But it is rare for a guy to do this at the pro level. So I'm not convinced. I think if a team has him play receiver, he's not playing two ways. If a team has him playing DB, he's going to play packages. And the last thing I'll say on that, going back to your article, is who was at Colorado Pro Day? Did you see?
I did not. Who were we talking
Champ
about?
Bailey.
There was a lot of people there. Champ, yes. I covered Champ. In 2004, I think it was 4, his first year there, he was lobbying Shanahan hard to play offense. And Shanahan kind of gave him a little bitty
Parsons, when I covered the Cowboys, was lobbying hard to do literally
all these guys
everything.
think they could do both, right? But I think Champ could have done it, but Shanahan just, he only caught one pass his entire Denver career for 11 yards. See, moonlighted a little bit on offense, but I think at the end of the day, Shanahan just said, this guy's a Hall of Fame cornerback. What am I doing? I'm not screwing that up. So I think that teams revert to that. But I think the one thing about Travis Hunter is if a guy has done it before, there's more of a benefit of the doubt that he could do it again. And I think Dion had a really interesting point about Travis Hunter, because Dion obviously was asked if he could play both ways. Dion, one of the few guys who kind of has pulled it off, although not to the level Travis wants to do it. Dion said, look, one of the reasons he could do it is the pace of play in college is so much faster. He's going to have all this energy at the end of NFL games. Like nobody plays at that pace in the NFL. He could go and go and go in college. He could definitely do it in the NFL because, in college, everything's hurry up, hurry up, hurry up. So you're playing a lot more snaps in college where you don't do that so much in the NFL. He's like, Travis Hunter's going to be jogging out there. Like, I know Dion is Dion and he's very, very much a showman, but I think it was a good point. And also, I think this was a good point too, that he keeps bringing up. It's saying it in different ways, but to sum it up, you're going to feel dumb if you're a coach and you have Travis Hunter as a receiver only, and you're watching your defense just get torched up and down the field because your cornerbacks aren't very good when the best cornerback in the 2025 draft class is standing next to you on the sideline like that. So that's interesting to me too. I just want to see, look, I don't know how much I'm just buying into the story here versus reality, because I know the reality is tough. Like to play like even a third of the time on one side of the ball, full time on the other is really, really difficult from a mental standpoint and a physical standpoint. But I just want to see this happen. I love Shohei Ohtani in baseball, and I've talked about him before. Just this freak who can be the best hitter of baseball and also one of the top 20 pitchers when he's healthy. I think of Travis Hunter, and I'm like, well, he's done it before. Like, he won a Heisman Trophy playing both ways. He has shown he can do it. I get college is not the NFL, but he's also playing altitude at Boulder in college at a quicker game. Maybe he's just a freak that could just do this where nobody else in the last 50 some odd years has been able to do it.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, again, I think from the history of the game standpoint and the fan standpoint, of course, we want Travis Hunter to play both ways. That would be so fun. He'd be a star. It'd be a lot of fun for the teams. I don't think the question is, can he keep up physically, as you're saying, going back to the speed of the game in college and just what they're being asked to do. I think the question is just, can the team work together at a high enough level? And to me, the only way you do that is, based off what I've heard, DB with packages at receiver. And the problem is that receiver is more valuable to the league right now, I think. Again, it depends on what your team is doing, but most teams are not going to draft Travis Hunter top 3 and put him at DB.
I want to get one more Travis Hunter question in with you, but we're going to take a break, and then I'm going to come back, and I'm going to ask you if Travis Hunter and a couple others before him are kind of changing the pre-draft process. We'll be right back. All right, Jori, I do want to touch on one other Travis Hunter topic that I think is very interesting because it got, it really is overshadowed a little bit by the Shedeur stuff and us talking about Travis Hunter going number 2. Travis Hunter basically this offseason has practically speaking said, I'm not doing your workouts. I'm not running a 40. I'm not going to the combine doing anything. At Colorado's Pro Day last Friday when the world came to town, by the way, he just ran a few routes. Like it was kind of easy for him. Didn't do the 40, didn't run all the, he wasn't just Shedeur's guy he was throwing to for 63 passes or whatever Shedeur threw to. I think it's very interesting because we saw this with Marvin Harrison last year. We saw a little bit before that. Christian McCaffrey, I remember being kind of the first guy to be like, I'm not doing private workouts. My tape is my tape, right? And Dion's obviously very quotable, right? And what he said really stuck with me. He said, look, Travis Hunter played more snaps than anybody in college football. What more do you guys need to see? The tape is the tape. You don't know who Travis Hunter is? And I thought that was really interesting because I agree with it. I think if you're a Travis Hunter, just like Marvin Harrison last year, who was to the extreme, he did nothing in the pre-draft. At least Travis Hunter ran a few routes. If you're one of these guys, look, Marvin Harrison went 4. He was going to go 4 if he did every single drill for months. He went 4 without doing any drills. I think that's how you should treat the process. And I know NFL people hate this, though. They hate not having control over players. Jori, what do you think of NFL people, or when you talk to NFL people, what do they think of kind of this new wave of, hey, these top prospects aren't going to do our dog and pony show the whole time during February, March, April?
Yeah, this is becoming increasingly common. I mean, we've had guys like Caleb Williams and Marvin Harrison Jr. do very similar things last year. To me, it's actually less about what you're going to do and more about, are you doing what you say you're going to do? That's what bothers me. And maybe that's just because I'm a reporter relying on this. Like, if you say you're going to talk to the media at Combine, talk to the media. If you're not going to, I mean, I don't like that, but I'd rather you at least be honest about it. If you think that Shedeur is throwing at Big 12 Pro Day, think that he's throwing. I mean, he went all the way to the Shrine Bowl. He didn't throw there. Now, again, I talked to scouts when I asked someone last week, like, did you think he was going to throw at Big 12 Pro Day? He was like, heck no. That wasn't his exact words. That's not happening. So some of this is just about what our perception is versus what the scouting community actually says. But I think to me, this was kind of like becoming the new expectation of top 3 to 5 picks of, what I have on film. The other interesting thing, it's not what Travis Hunter is like. Cam Ward, following in the footsteps of guys like Caleb Williams, we've had a few others recently, didn't get an agent. And so a lot of these guys aren't even getting agents for their rookie contracts, which I think influences some of the narrative surrounding them, because sometimes when you have, like, Abdul Carter has Drew Rosenhaus as an agent, so anytime there's a health update, Drew Rosenhaus is saying on the record to guys like Adam Schefter, Ian Rappaport, etc., here's what the doctor said, here's why we're not throwing, here's why we're not throwing, he said pass rusher, here's why we're not working out at the combine, here's why we're not working out at pro day, he's still on track for the season. And sometimes you don't have that same level of what you're expecting when you don't have an agent. And so I don't know. I don't think that a team is going to be so concerned. I do agree there's a lot of film. I also think that most of these guys, like most of these teams who are going to take him, sent scouts to practices and to the games when he played. So a lot of the pre-draft process is pretty outdated. And to me, if I'm a team, the only thing I would absolutely hands down want from them is to do the medical evaluation, which not everyone did last year. I think it was Caleb only did it for the Bears and maybe few
Yep.
others, but that's what I would want, because that's when you find certain things. And I understand why the players wouldn't necessarily want to do it, because why would you want to potentially hurt your earnings? But from a team standpoint, you are investing millions in these people, and so then you have to figure it out.
Can you see this changing in a major way over the next 5-10 years? Because look around, NBA player empowerment is a big deal, and they've really done a good job taking control of their careers and their paths and all that kind of stuff. And I think about the pre-draft process, and the one example I've said before, Christian McCaffrey a few years ago, but he's like, no private workouts. I don't want to do this for you guys. Why should I? Like, if you don't want to draft me, that's fine, but I'm not. Why? My tape is my tape. We've seen guys get hurt in private workouts. It happens. Like, and you don't want that to happen. And I also think, like, what if Travis Hunter can only screw up his draft stock by working out? Like, what if he runs a 4.58? Like, I don't think he would, but what if he did? All of a sudden we'd be like, oh my goodness, Travis Hunter completely tanked his draft stock. He could just sit it out. Say, draft me where you're going to draft me. Do you think that's going to happen more often? And not just guys in the top 5, maybe top 10, maybe top 15, of just saying, we're all banding together. We don't want to do this. And B, do you see this as being something where NFL teams really hold it against a guy in the draft, and his draft stock does slip? Because that hasn't happened yet. It didn't happen with Marvin Harrison. It didn't happen with Christian McCaffrey. It's not going to happen with Travis Hunter. So I don't really think that there's a negative impact right now on that.
To this point, the guys who have done this have been at a high enough point in the draft that they know it's not going to be held against them. And the teams don't really have the luxury of saying, this super talented player, we're not going to take him on principle. Like, no, you got to go win games. And if you want to keep your job, you have to find great talent if you're the general manager and anyone on the personnel side. I think it would be a slower process if we went from top 3 to top 5 to top 10 to top 15. Do I think that the college players could band together with the agents and say, we're not going to do this stuff anymore? Yes. But I think it's kind of like why I don't believe the NFLPA has maximized its strength. Football just has so many players with so many different interests that we have not historically seen them band together in successful ways to try and get the player rights in the same way that guys in the NBA have, and sometimes the MLB and other leagues. So I don't expect that to happen anytime soon. And I think, if anything, not to be so pro team here, but in some ways, the pre-draft process is just this big old distraction that sometimes gets people away from the main point, which is their film is the likeliest correlation to what they're going to do at the pro level. And the fewer things you have to distract you with recency bias, because the human brain is processed to, or is wired to factor that in, it might actually be better for some of these assessments. Now, again, you still want to be able to talk to them. Do you understand character? And you want to get the medical. But in terms of just the pure physical ability, the main reason teams want this is because they can compare it to a historical precedent to try and project. But it really the game has changed. And so you're trying to use this historical precedent for a game that is not the exact same. And that's where I think it comes into it. I did a story last year on Xavier Worthy and the 40-yard dash. And one of the things that Rams general manager Les Snead told me is that, yeah, it's easy for all these like analytics gurus to say that the 40-yard dash doesn't matter because how often are you running this 40-yard dash? Like, how often are you running 40 yards in the game and how representative that is? But one, even like the next gen analytics people were telling me that we don't yet have enough data of things like the short shuttle, the 3-cone, all of that to make that a usable data set. And two, what Les Snead told me is you understand that the way that these decision makers are wired, they are going to push a guy up for a fast 40. They are going to push him down for a slow 40. So he used it less for evaluation and more for draft strategy to understand, well, people are going to make decisions based on this, which is to say, he kind of knew that people were going to like fall into these traps because of a 40-yard dash. And so if these guys aren't running some of this, that actually might help the teams not get distracted.
For me, anyway, I view the whole pre-draft process as the NFL being very controlling and wanting to right away before these guys enter the league. And I don't think this is something they say out loud, but it's more subconscious, wanting to let the players know we control you. You do whatever we tell you to do. If you have to do 20 private workouts when you've played 4 seasons of college football and the tape is what we're going to go off anyway, you're going to come do it because we say so. The NFL acts very militaristic at times. And I think to them, this is basic training. We're going to put you through all of this.
It's pledgeship for Greek life.
Yeah, it's that exactly. We're doing it's pledge stuff, and I don't think they don't have this written on a sheet somewhere, but they want players to fall in line. And I like the fact that Travis Hunter's like, nah, what? I'm a Heisman Trophy winner. You don't want to draft me at top 3, that's fine, but I'm not working out for you because this is dumb. Like this doesn't make any sense. Exactly what Deion said. You don't know you don't know who Travis Hunter is? You should know who Travis Hunter is. He's played more snaps than anybody in college football. So I view this as, I think this is going to take off. I think that a lot more players are going to be like, this process is dumb. The whole combine process, again, very dehumanizing. They strip you down to nothing and poke and prod at you and take your measurements, and they do the wonder lick and then leak it out. So every anonymous scout can leak it out and you could just blast somebody and say, oh, this guy's so dumb. Look at his wonder lick score. I think players are going to see through this. And you're usually not thinking that way at 21, 22 years old. But I think we're seeing more guys like Marvin Harrison, Travis Hunter, who are surrounded by former pro players who just a lot more mature than maybe the generation before them, saying, no, this doesn't make any sense to me. So I'm interested to just see how it goes. I'm very interested. Another way that we saw kind of the NFL's control, I'm very cynical, I get that. We saw a Colorado Pro Day, Jori, one of the scouts telling the prospects there, no, I want you to run a 40 this way. And Deion stepped in and said, no. Y'all start how you want to start. Do your thing. Do what you guys want to do. What did you think of that kerfuffle? I viewed it as another, hey, we're not going to do everything. We're not just going to go through the paces just because you say so, because it's kind of ridiculous. You guys run the 40 however you want to run it. What did you think of that minor dust up that we're making too big of a deal about because it's April 2nd or April 8th?
The epicenter of the world. I mean, on one hand, like Deion has had success at every level by doing it his way. And so I think it's hard to question it. On the other hand, some of these scouts are probably saying, like, they want clean data. If you don't have if you want to eliminate as many variables as you can to understand how this 40 compares to another 40. And so I understand both sides. I understand why Deion's saying, like, we don't do it the normal way. We do it our way. And what was the line about? It wasn't the pro day. It was like the showcase of the world. I mean, they had all their slogans going on. I also think
branding, always branding.
I don't think the scout was necessarily trying to be controlling. I think the scout was trying to say the whole point of you running this is not to be fast. It's for us to have usable data, and you're messing up our data.
Yeah, I find honestly, I could go on about this forever because I find the pre-draft process ridiculous. And I find it ridiculous how anonymous scouts come out and trash 20-year-old guys just trying to make their way into a profession that they want to get into, their dream job, just because, and we just slough it off. Like, we're like, oh yeah, of course that Shedeur Sanders is getting trashed because some people want him to fall into draft. Oh, it cost him millions of dollars. Like, why is that okay? Like, I could go on forever about this, Jori, but we have other things to talk about. We're going to get to that after the break. I do want to talk about the news of the day, including Geno Smith and his extension with the Raiders. We'll be right back. All right, Jori, we had a quarterback sign a pretty big contract extension. Geno Smith, obviously traded to the Raiders. He wanted a little bit more money, probably one of the reasons Seattle traded him. He gets 2 years, $75 million extension from the Raiders. It could go up to 85.5, 66.5 million of that is guaranteed per reports. What do you think of this extension? I was just kind of like, okay, yeah, that's kind of what, if you're going to trade for Geno, you might as well make him happy by paying him.
Yeah, I mean, I think what was interesting is that Geno Smith considered being with the Seattle Seahawks. And the question was how much of this was a money situation that he left for, how much of this was, oh, it wasn't Mike McDonald who brought him in, it was Pete Carroll who brought him in. And by the way, he's now with Pete Carroll with the Las Vegas Raiders. The teams aren't quite in the same place. And I think he did get a level of guarantees that the Seahawks did not ultimately give Sam Darnold. And so I do think money was an element. I'm not saying it was the only element. I think he did really want to go play with Pete Carroll. I know he told Sports Illustrated's Albert Brewer that he'd continue to talk to Pete Carroll last year when Pete was out of the NFL, and they continued to have the conversation. But to me, when I see that in addition to his $31 million in 2025, he's got 2 years with about $75 million more. Well, that's about 3 years over $35 million, and it's also multi-year guarantees. The reason guys want multi-year guarantees is not just a matter of getting that money and cash flow. It's also a matter of, are you committing to me as the starter, ideally for multiple years? Now, what's interesting about that is we have to remember that the Atlanta Falcons last year gave Kirk Cousins the deal that the Minnesota Vikings would not give him, which was multiple years of guarantees, arguably expected to be the starter for 3 years based off the money he was getting, $100 million. And then they went and drafted Michael Penix Jr. 8th overall. And oh, by the way, Kirk was not even starting by the end of the year. And I'm not saying that Kirk had his career year. He didn't. But I do think that the money told us Kirk was going to be the starter for multiple years. That was a big reason why he left Minnesota to take it. And now what happens? So I have to ask the question of, yes, it's multiple years guarantees in ways Seattle wouldn't give it to him. But does that mean that they're not going to take Shedeur at 6? Because the Falcons didn't care.
Yeah, and that's, I think, again, teams are reimagining the way they look at quarterback. You got to be a little more creative than, hey, this is just the way the NFL's done it for decades and decades, so we got to do it the same way too. And if they love Shedeur Sanders at 6, yeah, sure, draft him. Why not? Because you're trying to get the quarterback right. It doesn't matter how you get the answer on the test. Like, they're not going to make you show your work. Like, you just got to get the right answer at the end of the day. And I think that if they do love Shedeur or Jackson Dart in second round or wherever, whatever the Raiders' plan at quarterback is, I just don't think in the modern NFL, the way things are shifting with, the Falcons doing their thing, I don't think it precludes you from making a draft pick like that. So, and the thing about Geno is he's going to be 35 years old. Like, it is risky to invest multiple years in him because we're at about the time when a quarterback really starts to fade, and we'll see that. And the funny thing is, if you would have told me 3 years ago that Geno Smith of all people was going to be signing a 2-year, $75 million extension, I wouldn't have believed you at all because his career was dead. He's just a backup for years and years and years. And you revive that. I wonder, because we've been talking about this, veterans who just kind of reinvent themselves. We've seen it. Baker Mayfield, Sam Darnold got a big deal this year. Geno, obviously. What do you think of this trend and how it relates to how teams view quarterbacks in the draft and free agency? However, the quarterback evolution is coming. We've now seen multiple veterans kind of rise from the dead to make their career something, get big money. Do you think this is the next trend in the NFL?
I definitely think it's a trend in the NFL. The only thing I'd say is it's not the next trend in the NFL because it's the current trend in the NFL. I mean, we're a couple years into this now. We saw it with Baker Mayfield. We saw it with Sam Darnold. We've seen it with Geno Smith. And I think this will continue. And there are a couple other players. The question is, like, could Daniel Jones be the next one with the Indianapolis Colts? There are a couple guys who definitely have the opportunity to fall into this category. What's interesting about Geno Smith is that it's easy to point to Pete Carroll as the head coach and say, he reunited with Pete Carroll. He's going to be a bridge quarterback, which isn't a knock. It just means, like you said, he's going to be 35 years old. He'll be a bridge who can play at a high level, can get them to be competitive over the next couple of years. Oh, by the way, he can also teach you Pete Carroll's culture. But to me, there's that element. And there's also the element that the Raiders' new general manager, John Spytek, came from the Tampa Bay Buccaneers, where he saw a team take Baker Mayfield and really rise to another level. Again, Geno played really well for the Seattle Seahawks in the last couple of years, but Baker Mayfield exceeded that. And so when you're talking about how you set up an offense for one of those later career quarterbacks who is finding success with a team, that to me is you have a head coach who's done it, you have a general manager who's done it, and oh, by the way, you have Tom Brady very involved. And if you want to know how present Tom Brady is, when Geno got this deal, Tom Brady FaceTimed him, according to what Geno told Albert Breer. He said he FaceTimed him and he said that we don't want to celebrate contracts, we want to celebrate wins. But he wanted this tone of, this is our quarterback, and we're giving you this extension in part so that you can be the unquestioned leader. And even if they draft a guy, the money suggests, Falcons are calling into question that, but the money suggests that Geno is your guy. And so I think that you have a lot of different influences. And I'm not saying that Geno's going to be Tom Brady. I do not believe he is. But if you want to have a few of the life hacks of how to prolong your career, Tom Brady is willing to give those to Geno Smith, and they are having conversations about that.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, it's an interesting situation. Great for Geno. He seems like a good guy, and he's really done a great job of reinventing himself. And I think about like maybe some of the other guys. Like one name that pops to mind is Kenny Pickett. He right now is pretty much the Browns' only choice. Like I know they might trade for Kirk Cousins, they might draft a guy, but as we sit here, it's kind of Kenny Pickett's show. Former first round pick. He has had moments in the NFL. He hasn't been a total brick. Like he has had some moments. So Kenny Pickett comes to mind for me as a guy who might be the next Geno Smith if he gets a chance. Like he's not making much money, but that's not the point. Baker Mayfield signed for nothing with the Buccaneers just to be like, I want to show I could start in this league. And he bet on himself and won fantastically. Anybody pop to mind for you among veterans before we get to rookies who might go down this path?
I mean, I think what I would say is I hope for Kenny Pickett's sake that he proves me wrong, but I have questions about the weapons surrounding him in Cleveland. And I also don't think we've seen any consistent play from him that suggests he's going to be that guy. I mean, Baker did have some success early in his career. And to me, the Browns are very likely to go with Kenny Pickett this year because Andrew Berry said on the record last week, their general manager, that they're going to skew young at quarterback. And I was trying to understand from people who are kind of close to the organization, well, do you really believe that they're not going to try and trade for Kirk Cousins? But the difference between the Giants and the Browns right now is the Giants are on this win in 2025 mandate. They needed Russell Wilson because they couldn't just draft a guy and wait. Brian Daboll and Joe Shane, the head coach and general manager, are not going to have their jobs in 2026 if they don't show market improvement this year from what they've seen the last few years. The Browns are not really at that. They're in a rebuild. They can't come out and say that on the record. I mean, Myles Garrett kind of hinted at it. That's a whole other story. But they need to show that they have the pieces to, in 2026, really be competitive. And so to give up the resources and the capital to get Kirk Cousins just does not make sense. So I think Kenny Pickett likely has the opportunity. I think they draft a quarterback late first or in the second round to succeed him, but it doesn't make a lot of sense. Ironically, the same team that is not doing this, which is the Giants with Russell Wilson, the quarterback that let them, I think, has the best opportunity here, and that's Daniel Jones with the Indianapolis Colts because I just think that the Colts have made pretty clear to Anthony Richardson that they do not believe the professionalism and the consistency of play and the improvement in technique is going to be sufficient. Now, in fairness to Anthony Richardson, and I wrote this recently, he was coming off an injury last year. And there is an element of like,
True.
if you have shoulder surgery, you might not be the most accurate thrower immediately after because you didn't spend your offseason repping how to throw. You spent it getting better and improving and healing. So I don't think Anthony Richardson has no chance. But I think that the Colts have taken every type of confidence he might have and pretty much shot it in the foot. And so I think Daniel Jones, to the flip side, like, again, I talked about this. There are people who I talked to who have been offensive coordinators for quarterback battles. And I said, how would you decide? And they said, I'd make it a competition. Not only would I try and give them the same number of reps or very similar, but I would try and give them that number of reps of the same type of reps. So I really have apples to apples film to compare. And then ultimately, if it's close, I would go to the leaders of the team and say, which do you want starting? Because it matters if the players have input. I'm not saying you let the players run the show completely, but you do want guys who they believe in the guy that's throwing to them. And I think there's a lot of reason for us to look at the evidence of Daniel Jones' career and the evidence of Anthony Richardson's career and to say that it is much more likely that Daniel Jones wins over that locker room based off what he does and the way he conducts himself.
Man, what Anthony Richardson might be a guy we're talking about in the same thing in 3 years. Like, can Anthony Richardson revive his career? A name to keep an eye on in that regard. Trey Lance just signed a one-year deal, incentive laden with the Chargers. One of my biggest misses of all time, and Charles Robinson will never, ever, ever let me forget it. I liked Lance. I thought he was going to click with Kyle Shanahan because I fully trust Kyle Shanahan with quarterbacks. It just didn't fit. Something's going to have to happen. I don't put Trey Lance on this list yet because we need to see progress. He's all over the place. He needs something to click in his career. But it did for Sam Darnold with the right. Sam Darnold showed nothing, basically, until he got with the Shanahan offense and then Kevin O'Connell after that. Maybe something is there with Trey Lance because I just, man, he just done nothing to this point. But maybe Trey Lance. And I do wonder, like, do NFL teams think differently about the draft? Do we think differently about the draft with this whole concept of maybe your first team ain't going to work out for you with these quarterbacks, but these quarterbacks maybe on their second, third team. And I'll tell you a guy I think of with this is Jalen Milroe. He's very young. I think he just turned 22. He hasn't played a ton of football, but high-level football, obviously, in the SEC. I don't see him as a finished product, but he's obviously a phenomenal athlete. He brings all the tools you want to the table. I just wonder if he's going to be more of a long-term project where Team A, whoever drafts him, the Browns or whoever in the second round, might get like really antsy with him, impatient, cast him off, and then somebody like the Buccaneers in 3 years picks him up and turns him into something. Do you think that this changes this whole idea that we're in this, you said it, we're in this kind of era in the NFL right now of reclaiming quarterbacks? Does this extend to the draft and how teams might think differently of it or how we should think differently about it?
Yeah, it's a great question, Frank. And I think the answer is absolutely. And I had a conversation with the GM last week of, to me, some of these teams have to ask themselves, do you believe that a top 5 to 10 quarterback in this year's draft starting right away is going to be better over the course of 3 to 5 years than a late first round or into the second round quarterback who has up to a year to sit, maybe more, somewhere between half a year and a year and a half. And I think if you don't believe that the first guy's going to be better, go get a generational talent. And I know I already talked about the Browns like this, but they're not the only one who is in this situation. I think there are multiple teams who will say, no, we should just let this guy develop. And I was actually thinking about this morning. I don't know why I woke up thinking about quarterback prospects. I'm not sure that speaks well to my ability to separate work from life, but that's another story. And I'm like, am I just being completely delusional about the amount of talent it takes and teams not taking it? But I think we just see so many quarterbacks at the top of the first round who fail because their teams don't set them up for success that, to me, quarterback play in the NFL is not only about the player. Justin Fields could be another guy who we didn't even talk about in the reclamation process who probably deserves it. Chicago, he was not set up for success. Pittsburgh, his job was taken from him when he was winning. And I did believe that Russell Wilson should have that job for multiple reasons we don't need to get into. But there are a lot of these guys who, because the nature of the top picks of the draft is that these teams are drafting because they've failed in recent years and they have not been able to get the wins, the combination of that and the dysfunction that often comes when you have a team that's losing, it'd be great if that wasn't the case, but historically that often is. These guys just don't enter healthy environments. And I'm not even trying to say healthy in terms of some new age millennial Gen Z situation. I'm just saying healthy in terms of realistic expectations about what they can do. And so I think we will see teams in this year's draft where the quarterbacks are not as polished say, no, draft a guy later. Don't draft a quarterback with my second or third pick and give them the time to develop so that ultimately I can benefit from what he's going to do rather than someone else. And the other element is, one of the reasons that these high quarterbacks often fail is because they don't have the pieces around them. Well, if you draft a quarterback second of your picks rather than first, well, now you gave them another piece to work with.
Absolutely. I just enjoy the conversation about old guys reviving their careers because, hey, there's hope for me. It could happen, Yahoo. 5 years down the road, I could actually become a star. Until then, I'll let Jori Epstein be the star. You can find her on social media at Jori Epstein. You can find me at Yahoo Schwab because I'm a company man. Thanks very much to our people behind the scenes, producers Madison and Stone, doing God's work. We miss you, Fitz. That's your shout out right there. Please rate and review us. We're here with you twice a week talking football, and we love it. Until the next time, we'll talk to you soon.